Hi, I'm Rick Crow, and this is Short Track Stories.
All right, Rita, thank you so much for joining us here on Short Track Stories. Uncle Rick and I have been reading about you and your story, and ever since Uncle Rick first heard it and he told me, we both have been fascinated. So we're very excited to get to know you and to have you shed a little bit more light on who exactly you are. But first off, how you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I always ask our guests, where are you joining us from?
Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Okay.
Tuscaloosa.
So I don't see any, in Saban We Trust, or I don't see anything Crimson Tide-ish in the background.
I have to work all the football games because I'm a City of Tuscaloosa police sergeant.
Okay.
So I got kind of burned out on football after about the first 2 years of working 16-hour days on my day off.
Okay. All right. Now, you just brought up something I was not going to go here, but since you brought that up, have you had any experiences, encounters with any of the Crimson Tide team or Coach Saban?
Occasionally, maybe one or two of the football players might get a little bit drunk out at the bars, and we've had one or two get punished by having to ride along with us, and I don't know who is getting punished more, us or them. But overall, it's not bad at all. They respect the program and they respect Coach Saban, and they tend to mind their manners.
Okay.
Spoken like a true Alabama fan right there, right? They don't put they don't arrest them and put them in the paper or anything, right?
It's very rare. If someone does something that requires an arrest, a DUI, domestic violence, where we have no discretion, obviously they're going to jail.
That's not true.
Right.
Saban comes down and says, "Hey, do me a favor, Rita."
I've never met the man.
No, I guarantee you the mayor has.
I have no doubt.
Well, Rita, for those who might not know, you have a very interesting story. So you did say that you are Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You are a police officer, and now you are racing as well. So we'll just go ahead and rewind the clock here a little bit. So what came first, the desire to race or the desire to serve and protect?
Kind of a mix. I've all my adult life, I've wanted to serve people. I've wanted to make my community a better place. But I've also really liked driving fast. And one great thing about being a cop is you can kind of combine both.
Yes.
Very true. So where was there any certain person in your life that you felt like racing came from, or even the first responder side came from?
So as far as racing, this is going to sound dumb, but it was actually my dad. He wasn't into racing, but our first car was this 1983 rusty Subaru station wagon. And that was back before Subarus were cool. Like they were like the Hyundais and the Kias right now.
Subarus aren't cool, Rita.
They are cool. I would kill for an Outback.
Oh my goodness.
I have a Forester.
They're awesome. See, four-wheel drive. Reliable. You could fit everything in it. No one tries to race you at the streetlights.
True.
Perfect. But me and him we went fishing because that was our thing that we did together. And I was like, "Hey, Dad, how fast will this go?" And there was no one else in the car, so he's like, "Let's find out." And it got up to about 70, and it sounded like it was going to fall apart. But I remembered that. I really liked going fast, and that just kind of stayed with me.
That's awesome. So my dad is Rick's brother, and he retired from the LA County Sheriff's Department about 7 years ago, over 30 years under his belt. And so I grew up, it's very interesting because I grew up, obviously with him as a dad, and we did the quote unquote regular sports. And while my uncle was racing, we had other stuff going on as well. And so we never really were able to mix, but it's just something that's always fascinated me is racing and things like that. And to have grown up in Los Angeles, where I was from, especially when I was growing up, you had the movies like The Fast and the Furious that were inspiring, racing and drifting in the streets. And so you always had the cops who were chasing the racers down. And here you are like a renegade, almost living, both sides of the tale here. So what do you get more of an adrenaline rush with? If you hear the police sirens, calling out a code saying you have to go, respond to something, or when you're driving down the straightaway?
Definitely the police stuff. There's more on the line. With racing, once I get in the car, I'm 100% calm. I know it's not sounded on the radio because I have my little version of NASCAR Radioactive in Mid-Ohio. But yeah, I don't really get that adrenaline rush while racing. It's all about being focused and disciplined. But if there isn't, like the other day, one of my officers called out on a traffic stop and you could hear yelling at the driver to stay in the car, and then she quit responding to the radio. That was a big adrenaline dump, and everything turned out fine. But I worry about my guys. It's a completely different kind of stress.
Yeah, when I race, you're prepared to go race, and you kind of have little clickers in the car, like I'm belted in, and then my helmet goes on, and then the window net goes up. And when the window net goes up, that's like a different thing. But on a police department, when I get a call on the radio, it's just totally unexpected. You don't have a clue what you're going to or anything. And
absolutely.
so
some of the craziest calls I've been on were called in as minor stuff.
Yeah. Domestic violence are the worst. So
and traffic stops.
Yeah. So you fascinate me. Your story fascinates me in just there's so many just phenomenal things about you as a human being that fascinate me and that I admire. And I know we skipped right to, Alabama and football. So Brandon's a sports kid, and he just recently started getting racing, like you said. Oddly enough, we grew up, we lived 2 miles away from each other and 3 miles from the racetrack. And as Brandon said, in my 25, 30-year racing career, his dad never came to a race because he was always doing the dad thing. And Saturdays, were baseball and stuff like that, which Brandon was all-star, so he played all around. So you were born in Rhode Island.
Yes, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So I guess technically I'm a Yankee.
Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And then you guys made the journey to Alaska, which my son was stationed in Alaska. It's a beautiful place. And so how did you make the journey to Alaska?
So we moved around a lot growing up, to the point where people would ask me if my dad was in the military. I think I figured it out once. Between age 0 and 16, it was an average of every 6 months. My parents were just convinced that life would be better if we just went to Oklahoma or Arizona or Montana, and we just kind of like skipped around a good bit. But when I was about 11, we were in Montana, and my dad just really wanted to go to Alaska. He has a sweating disorder to where he can't sweat, and he felt like being in a cold climate would allow him to explore the outdoors and do the things he really wanted to do. So we packed up that rusty Subaru and we drove to Alaska. Yes.
And how old were you when you guys got to Alaska?
I was 11.
11 years old.
Yep.
That's traumatizing for a kid to move even across town, let alone that far. So you didn't really grow up where there was a lot of racing going on either. Alaska, Rhode Island, that type of stuff. And so I know that there was some and this fascinates us as well, because both Brandon and I suffer from depression and anxiety. Like we struggle, Brandon and I both, and it's something that has connected he and I. And just recently he's been able to talk about it. The depression and anxiety really causes you to do a lot of things, maybe like move around a lot and stuff like that, right? Or maybe act out or whatever, if you don't have the support that you have. So you said that your mom had some issues and your father had some issues, and I'm sure those weren't great growing up in that environment. But if we started the journey just at about 16 years old, your mom dropped you off at a homeless shelter, and I get choked up when I talk about it, in Alaska.
Yeah, she got remarried. When my dad got really sick, she divorced him. And then she remarried another man who I didn't mind him very much, but I wasn't about to fall into the role of being his daughter, because I wasn't. My sister was way more receptive. She was changing her name, and I just I wasn't being a jerk, but I just wasn't about to,
How
you
old were
can't
you?
erase the last 16 years. And I think my mom kind of resented that I wasn't falling in line to be this perfect little family she wanted. So I got dropped off at a homeless shelter at 16.
At 16 years old.
Yep. And it's okay. It is what caused my life to be where it is. If that hadn't happened, I don't know what would have happened, but I got dropped off and I had like 2 garbage bags of my clothes and I cried for like 2 days straight. And then I looked around and I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I got to do something. It's all on me now. I have no family. I have no friends. I'm in a pretty strange city. I'm underage. And I just made a list. I'm like, okay, so first off, I have to get a job. To get a job, I have to have a way to get to the job. So I bought a bike with the last money I had. I learned how to ride the bike, and then I used the bike to get a part-time job and slowly started working my way out.
Well, that sounds all easy and well at 30 something years old to be able to look back at that and say, but I'm sure that, I mean, shit, I didn't even get a job till I was probably 40 and didn't learn how to ride a bike till I was 35 or whatever. And so, I mean, isn't that just fascinating, Brandon? Can you imagine getting dropped off at a homeless shelter with 2 bags at 16 years old and then having to make a list and pull yourself up by the bootstraps?
Well, what's crazy is that, so right now I am a sports broadcaster on the side and trying to make that a full-time thing, but to pay the bills, I work for the state of Utah and I help people get their food stamps and get their Medicaid. And so I deal with the people that are applying for these benefits. And a lot of them, a big chunk of them are homeless and they have gone through different struggles, and even the people that are not homeless, we struggle with. And these are full-blown adults, and they have a hard time coming up with a list and coming up with the inner fire or desire to go out and to make something different from the circumstance that they're in. And so, I mean, like it's very hard to put words to, to who you are and to what you've been able to do. But it's just, it's extraordinary to be able to have that fire within you, and to be able to at 16 be dropped off essentially in a foreign place and on your own, and to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I need to do. How am I going to get it done? And let me go get it done. It's incredible.
Yeah. So what was the job?
I worked as a movie theater attendant / cashier for the Alaska Experience Theater in downtown Anchorage. It was this little tourist trap. Right. They had like an IMAX theater. And they played like this Alaska wildlife movie, and then we sold like overpriced t-shirts.
I know exactly where that theater is.
No way.
I do, because my son was stationed in Anchorage at, I forgot the name of the base, but we flew in Anchorage. We stayed in Anchorage, Elmendorf. Yeah. We stayed in Anchorage for, a week or 2 weeks and went back and forth to the base. And I remember seeing that little downtown theater and a lot of homeless. And so another thing that fascinates me, or that doesn't fascinate me, but I was a reserve cop here in LA as well, and my brother is a cop, and so you get kind of tainted. And I think people, including myself for a long time, maybe wasn't as compassionate as I should be for people that you see homeless, because you just assume, like, if I saw you homeless, I would just assume you were a crackhead or a meth head and you did something to deserve to be homeless. That's not true.
No. And a lot of the homeless in the Tuscaloosa area are, they're stuck in drug addictions. They're stuck with untreated mental illness. And once you get to that point where you're homeless, it is so hard to climb out, because a job wants you to be clean and neat and have clean clothes and have an address. And it's hard to do that when you're homeless, and keeping track of stuff like your driver's license and your social security card and all the stuff you need to get a job is rough.
Is there an answer?
I don't know if there's a solution. I feel like housing, like if we could just get people into places to live, they'd have that stability. Something a little better than the Salvation Army that kicks you out all day. A place they can call their own, and then treatment for mental illness and drug addiction. But there's no real easy solution. And when it comes down to it, the individual person does have to want to change, and not everyone's there yet.
Yeah. I always felt like you get like a Home Depot sized building and you put showers and bathrooms, and you bring in, because I had witnessed where, we would hand out flyers to homeless people and say, here's how you get your resources, but the resources were 25 miles away.
Yeah.
Right. And I always felt like if you could bring them into one building and you put the social workers, the mental health people, everybody right in that same building, that there might be a chance. But I don't want to harp on that too much. It just fascinates me because
But I am excited about this thing we're doing in Tuscaloosa. We got a grant to have basically that for the mental health issues, where it's like a 24 access facility where there'll be like some places for people to stay during the day, access to social workers, access to counselors.
Wow.
I'm really hoping that works out. I know we got a grant for it, but I'm not really privy to the details, and that would be amazing.
That's awesome.
It solves so many problems that have grown up to be bigger problems. I mean, if you can tackle homelessness and some mental illness in one place and give people some hope, it would change so many. The crime would go down, and I'm not going to get into all that, but it's just, you are fascinating because I'm not even talking about the racing part. If I saw you in a bar and I heard your story, I would just be fascinated as a human being. But I'm old, and the older I get, the softer I get, right? Just the mental illness you had to deal with, the homelessness and all that stuff. I mean, your story would be fascinating if you were a Golden Spoon girl and you started your racing career. But this stuff before your racing career, and now your ability to understand the homeless aspect and be in a position to impact that, you're in a position to make a lot of changes in the world, and that's fascinating.
I just want to make a difference for one person. I've been a cop for 10 and a half years. I know I can't save the world, but if I can make one person's day, give them a little bit of hope, maybe give them access to resources in the community, that's all I want to do. Just one person.
That's what Brandon does every day.
Well, God bless you, Rita. That's just amazing.
Yeah. And so another thing that I'm going to, it's not really a personal confession, but it's something that I haven't probably been as compassionate with, because I kind of just treat everybody equal, right? And I don't really care what religion somebody is or whatever they are. It's like, if you're good to me, I'm good to you, or whatever. And so your mom also wasn't very happy because you had told her you felt you were bisexual.
Yes, the first crush I ever had was when I worked at the McDonald's before I got kicked out, and it was this like goth chick, and I was like, "This is."
Everybody loves a good goth chick, Rita.
Yes, I love a good goth chick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up very religious, and I felt like there was something broken and wrong with me, so I confessed to her, and she wound up taking me to the doctor. One of the reasons she put me on birth control really early. She's like, "You just need hormones." She told everyone in the church, and they all prayed over me. It was super awkward. But that didn't change who I was. I just felt that I was somehow just made wrong, I guess. And it wasn't until I was maybe 18, 19 that I started really coming to terms with it.
Maybe you're just a lover of people, right?
I do like people.
Right. Because you're married now, right?
Yes.
And
I have a girlfriend.
So you're polyamorous. Is that what they call that?
Yes. So my girlfriend, Kim, we've been dating, fairly casually, but we really like each other for probably a year and a half now. And then my husband and I have been together for over a decade. And, I have my relationship with her, and then I have my relationship with him. And that's where that goes. They don't have any kind of relationship, and it's not.
Oh, so that's not polyamorous.
Separate. It's kind of polyamorous, but not polygamous, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Damn, you got it made, girl.
I have a complicated life.
It's not. It's from the outside looking in, if you're not in compassionate to something like that, or you're not accepting, then it can look really complicated. But from your end, if you are accepting, it's just peace, love, and it's like the 60s all over again, right? Just
holidays get complicated.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I have two boys in the military, and my oldest son, they call him a 9/11 baby. And My son will tell you the first time he ever saw me cry was when he woke up to go to school on 9/11. And I know 9/11 was a turning point that kind of changed your life. How did 9/11 impact you?
Before 9/11, I was a little directionless. I mean, sure, I had gotten the job. I was working part-time. I had the bicycle. I had a boyfriend, still living at the homeless shelter part-time. But I really didn't know what to do from there. I kind of wanted to become a mountain climbing guide on Denali, but I really didn't know where to start. And I was just kind of taking a couple college classes on mountaineering. And then I was asleep at the homeless shelter and I got woke up and they're like, we're evacuating downtown. And I'm like, why? And something about a plane crash. At the time, there was an airliner that wasn't in communication with the tower. So they were worried that downtown Anchorage would get exploded. Right. So I was like, I had no idea what was going on. So I walked to my job and someone had drugged the break room TV out and put it on the counter. And there was like a bunch of tourists just standing around and I'm watching and I'm like, what happened? And they're like, an airplane's crashed into the Twin Towers. It was a terrorist attack. And in that moment, the only thing I wanted to do was pack up and go to New York. I don't know what I would have done. I could barely afford a plane ticket, but
I think we all did.
Yes. And I'm like, but I have no skill. I'm useless. And in that moment, I was like, well, that's not going to happen again. And I went to medical assisting school, started working as a personal care assistant in an assisted living home, then went to EMT school, went to paramedic school, and became a paramedic. And all of it stemmed from the desire to not have to sit at the sidelines the next time something like that happens.
Yeah, I think that's you're a 9/11 baby.
Yep.
You know, and you know, yeah, I think 9/11 changed a lot of lives, and I know it changed my boys, and it you know changed mine, and so you so 9/11 was
2001.
1.
Yep, I had just turned 18. And when I got dropped off at the homeless shelter, I had almost 17. So I spent about a year living at the homeless shelter and then kind of transitioned to their halfway house for teenagers who still weren't quite ready to figure things out.
How was that?
It wasn't bad. I had my own room at the halfway house. It was the size of a walk-in closet.
A step up from the homeless shelter.
Yeah, step up from sharing bunk bed, like from, being in bunk beds.
Right.
Actually, when me and my husband moved into this house, I cried like every day I came home because our walk-in closet in the master bedroom is the size of my room when I was at the halfway house. And it just felt, it's amazing. We live in a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage house. I'm like, what the heck happened?
Right. Well, you know what happened. You earned it, girl. So 2006, you leave Alaska and you don't go where you've been before. You don't go down to Washington. You don't go to an adjoining state. Yeah. You go to frickin' Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Like, how do you make that move? It's like I moved from California to Utah, right? I didn't move across the United States.
Well, I had moved a lot in the past, so it wasn't like a foreign thing. But my paramedic instructor, the way paramedic school in Alaska was set up, you couldn't do all of it in Alaska. You could do the book work and some of the internships, but you needed a 3-month unpaid externship at a bigger facility to actually license you. And Alaska didn't have that. So my options were Las Vegas or Tuscaloosa. And my paramedic instructor used to work here. And he's like, look, if you go to Tuscaloosa, I can get you a part-time job doing like medical billing. And that way you're not starving while you're finishing your unpaid internship. So we're like, all right, let's go to Alabama.
Had he not stepped in, would you have chose Vegas?
Yes, very much so.
You'd be a crackhead by now in Vegas. Yeah, that was a good choice.
Yes, everything works out.
At your age, I would have chose Vegas too, but now I know better, Yep. So you didn't even get a driver's license till you're 23 years old.
Yes. So one problem is when you grow up as poor as I do, you really can't afford to have the teenager in the car. And it just never really was an option growing up. And then my first husband was pretty controlling of what I did and didn't want me to learn how to drive. So I didn't actually get the freedom to get a driver's license till I moved down to Alabama.
So I got to tell you, at 23 years old, I probably already had 6 years of racing under my belt. You know,
I got a late start.
at 23 years old, I'd have to look at what year it was, but I was probably already in a super late model or a modified. I'd already wrecked a bunch of shit to get there.
I'm so jealous. I that's one thing that sucked about my racing career is I started so late. I can't go back and create that experience.
No, but and it's funny because I didn't come from a racing family. I mean, they were fans, but it's not like my dad raced and everybody raced and I had a race car in the driveway. I actually had a neighbor that moved in that had a race car, and I went to work for him at his drywall company, and that kind of got me hooked. So you start paving your way. You learn to drive at 23.
Yep, my little 1996 Mazda Miata with a stick shift. So my first car was a standard transmission. That was fun.
That's why you're here today, because if it was an automatic, you'd be in real trouble.
Yes.
Right? So now we're going to get into the racing part of your journey. And
my passion.
If I took your journey, I'm not so sure I would have got out of the homeless shelter, made the move, been a parent. I would have probably been in the fetal position still. And so you get this little Mazda Miata, and then you discover this brilliant thing. Really, they call it autocrossing, but it's really a bunch of thugs just burning up asphalt somewhere. Like, that's what we call it in California.
Autocross is a great intro to racing. And it took a little bit for me to get there because my first car was my daily driver, my 96 Miata. And at the time, I thought I'd done some research into it because I loved going fast in that thing. That was my stress relief as a paramedic. I just dropped the convertible top, throw on like some Phil Collins, and then just drive.
Go ahead, Brandon. What was your go-to Phil Collins?
In the Air Tonight.
Oh, hell yeah.
I would time my shifts to when the drum beat.
That's what, if you're, wasn't that like the opening scene of like the first episode of Miami Vice, of them like driving slow with the In the Air Tonight?
Yeah. I think so. I would just always try to time it to where when the drums drop towards the end of the song, I'd be shifting. It was fun.
I can see that like in Top Gun, where he would like go into the afterburners right then or something.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody's done something to the drum beat of In the Air. You want to hear a crazy story? I put that on my youngest son's basketball warm-up tape because I'm like, oh hell, dude, like this is the best pump thing ever, right? And I put that on there and they're like, what is that? Like, that's stupid. I'm like, you guys are nuts. Like, what do you want? Like Macklemore or something? But
Macklemore was actually pretty good.
Not bad, right?
Yeah.
So you had your Miata and you did some autocrossing, which is kind of just like drifting and burning rubber in the Albertsons parking lot when I grew up around some parking stumps.
Yeah. So we had like a cone course set up, and they would usually be about 30-second runs. And Alabama SCCA is actually fairly professional about it. We don't really get a lot of like, people just trying to like hoon up their cars, and they have like sound restrictions, and it was a good intro. And I met some race car drivers, like they did spec Miata, and I had a Miata, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna race spec Miata, and everyone kind of laughed at me a little bit.
Brad Perez and Will Rogers or something.
I don't remember their names.
Do you know? Have you met Brad Perez?
I don't know if I've ever actually met him.
Is that his name, Brad Perez? That's him, right? Have you met Will Rogers?
Mm-mm.
You don't know anybody.
I don't know anybody.
Perez
I know Jim Drago. I know. Well, I've met Preston Pardis. I don't know if Preston and I have ever actually raced together.
So Perez and Rogers both came out of spec Mazda Miatas. I mean, Rogers was a Hawaiian kid that came out here and did it, and Perez did it too. And SCCA. Brandon likes SCCA because he's fascinated with Willow Springs, which is an SCCA track, and that's kind of where they filmed. What's the name of the movie, Brandon?
Well, they filmed a bunch of stuff out there, but the latest one was Ford versus Ferrari.
Ford versus Ferrari was filmed there.
That's awesome.
And that's it's at Willow Springs, and I raced out there and won a couple championships and raced at that track regularly. And so it happens to be probably an hour tow maybe from where we grew up. So he's fascinated with the SCCA, and I think that's a great place to start because you can just take a street car out there on the weekend and What, a Miata that's a nice affordable car, or a Porsche or whatever, and you just rip it up.
Yeah, it was fun. I started doing so I was 34 going on 35 when I started really getting into racing.
No, you were 35 going on like 65. Like when you were 16, you were 35. Let's be honest.
I grew up quick.
Yeah.
And my husband and I had talked about having kids, and neither of us really wanted kids. And I'm like, look, I don't really want to have kids past 35. And he goes, yeah, let's just not have them. We're too stubborn and set in our ways at this point. So at that point, when I realized I could be horribly financially irresponsible, I started stripping out the interior of my Miata. At that time, it was my second Miata. I had a daily driver, and then I had a autocross Miata. And started turning it into a race car, having never been on a racetrack before, having no idea what I was doing. I'm just like, you know what? I've watched enough NASCAR videos. I can do this.
Wow.
I found a roll cage builder, contracted out to him, and did most of the interior work myself, and got someone to install the suspension, and like I installed the seat. I broke my nose pulling my own steering wheel.
That's
Man,
It was that big, like 19 millimeter nut that holds the steering wheel on. And I
yeah.
was after I disabled the airbags, I was getting the steering wheel off so I could put on my little Sparco one. And that wrench came back and popped me right in the nose, and I wound up like loosening teeth, and
You could never
my nose
tell.
hurt for like 3 months.
Well, the problem was you used something Sparco. Like Sparco wasn't even around when I remember when kids started wearing Sparco, and I'm like, who's Sparco? Like,
Oh.
now it's Sparco and like Alpine Star, and they didn't make fire suits back. I don't know, not so sure they make fire suits now. They might contract them out, but
Most people did.
we grew up with a safety company, DJ Safety, that did all of our stuff, and Simpson was the big name until they framed him after the Earnhardt accident, and ran him out of business. But so you had your little, excuse me, I'm getting over COVID right now, believe it or not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got it from Brandon probably.
I have managed not to catch COVID yet.
I had not caught it. And we just, my son came to visit last week, and then my daughter came to visit from Colorado. My son's from California, and one of those two boogers brought it right into my house. So the Miata thing, how long did you do the Miata? And is that all road course?
Yes. I raced my Miata all through, let's see, my first race in my Miata. Well, I went to Level Up Racing School mid 2019. And then my first race in the Miata was at Barber Motorsports Park at the end of 2019. And then pandemic, but I still like the very first track day in the Southeast after the pandemic, I was there. And then I raced all through the pandemic, and then sold my Miata in the beginning of 2021 to build the stock car. So I got a solid bit of racing in with the spec Miata. Won a couple times, lots of top 5s and top 10s.
Solid bit of racing.
Small fields, but still.
She said solid bit of racing with her Miata.
Oh yeah, I was at a track every weekend that I could afford to be, and made a lot of poor financial decisions, much to my husband's dismay. Worked a lot of overtime jobs.
Like the great Dominic Toretto said, it's not about the car, it's about the driver.
Yeah. And I did a lot of 24 Hours of Lemons and Champ Car stuff as well.
My point is, racing in the ARCA East right now. And if you go through and look at the drivers in the ARCA East or any, the ARCA series isn't what the West series used to be. It is driver development to its fullest.
Yeah.
Gibbs has teams, Penske has teams. When I was growing up racing, that didn't happen. It started like Logano was one of the first kids out here that came out to race with us that was on a factory sponsored type team. But now they're everywhere. So the reason I'm poking fun is, here's a homeless girl that is now skipped 55 divisions of racing.
I know, right? I jumped right to the top.
Who do you think you are? I mean, when I saw, looks at Brandon and I laugh because we've done a lot of these where guys on the West Coast have gone from our short track, like a 3rd mile, doing 90 down the straightaway. And then they're like, and they say it like this. Well, and then they opened Ontario Speedway, which is like Indy. And so we went to Indy.
Yeah.
I'm like,
no big deal.
we have guys that we've interviewed that I've known growing up that went from doing a figure eight at 80 miles an hour at our local track to racing Riverside, which is like Sonoma or Mid-Ohio in Ontario, and then come back and won the street stock championship at the local track. And you're like, what, that's Big Balls Pete stuff. Like, where did you, and they say it nonchalant. And so you say it nonchalant. The difference between the Miata and a full size, first of all, the Miata is probably faster. Let's be honest, right?
It would have been faster at Mid-Ohio.
Yes, and it handles better. And we also, and I know enough because I've been in one or two of them, that the Arca Menards West cars, they're just big fat pigs, and they're lazy compared to a Miata. You could throw it into the corners a little bit, but not the Arca car. But you're racing. This is just the story. The plot thickens because
I don't have the background that I should have in racing to be doing what I'm doing.
No, you should have been in karts. Is there a local track by your house right now?
There is Montgomery Motor Speedway, which is a paved half mile or close to a half mile.
Okay,
and that's like
did
an
you
hour
never
and a half
go
away.
there?
No. So
wait. You've never even gone to that track?
I've never even gone to that track.
Are you kidding me?
I've done some dirt track racing at Buckshot Speedway in Clanton County, but
Man.
I've never been to Montgomery Motor Speedway.
Because if you would have gone to Montgomery Motor Speedway, you would have probably been smart enough to think, I better not get an ARCA car. I'll get in a street stock and then maybe a super late. Or you went to an ARCA car. And this gets me thinking, I'm going to get an ARCA car, right?
Might as well.
My experience with that division of racing is it's a hassle.
They are incredibly good. The talent level in ARCA is way better than you think when you watch it.
No, the talent level is incredible, but I don't get along with officials and templates and left side weight rules.
Tech is a chore. It takes like an hour to get your car through tech, and there's always something wrong. No matter how well you think you've prepared your car, there will be something you have to change.
And that's why I don't like officials.
They're actually really nice in the ARCA and Menards, like the main series. I've never done the East or West.
And you're going to say that.
They're always willing to work with me. They understand that I'm a fairly novice driver with a fairly novice team.
And a social media following.
They've always just been really kind. It's like the series officials almost make it feel more like club racing. You can like go up to the series director and just chat with them.
I can't. You can. See, now you're starting to get some favors, right? They're starting. Are they do they treat you like the dudes, or do you think that, okay, all right?
I don't think the other drivers think a ton of me because I haven't really shown what I can do on track.
But they're all Golden Spoon drivers, and so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'm not going to be going to the Cup Series. I'm not Ty Gibbs. I'm not Sammy Smith. I'm not Daniel Dye. But I'm going to be very happy racing in ARCA and eventually maybe win something.
Who's Sammy Smith?
Oh, one of the ARCA drivers that's actually like pretty darn good.
I don't even know who he is. So you're in and see, the ARCA series is all hacked out right now too. It's gone, it started off in the 60s, if you didn't know or not, but the Winston West series and the Winston Cup series. And then it went, and they could intermingle, and then it went to something else, and it now became ARCA Menards, and there's an East and a West and a combined, and I can't even keep up with that. I just know it's as expensive as hell. It's
really just when NASCAR bought ARCA, they basically folded the K&N East and West series into it.
K&N,
and yeah,
that was not a good move. I'm going to say it. I know you can't, but that was the dumbest thing ever, because now to win the combined series, a guy from the West has to travel, instead of just doing Oregon, Washington, Colorado. We called it the Southwest Tour and the West Tour, which, by the way, produced the greatest drivers ever. Now they have to go, McNally and guys like that out here, they have to go east, and that's expensive. And you need 18 wheelers for that and all kinds of stuff. So you've done 2 races in the ARCA series.
Yep.
Your first one was a couple weeks ago.
Berlin Raceway in Michigan.
How many cars were in that race?
17.
And you finished 12th, right?
Yeah. I would have finished better, I think, had my car decided it. My car really didn't want to stay running. There's this weird issue I thought we fixed, but didn't apparently, where every time I let off the gas, basically anytime there's low RPMs, the engine dies. Like it doesn't want to idle. And I didn't really, given how slow I was, that was my first paved oval race ever. And given how slow I was, I didn't want to add a car issue because I've driven through car issues before and that takes some experience. I was doing a road course race and we lost like second and third gear. So you pretty much had to do the entire race in first and fourth. And I remember thinking what a hassle that was. And it was on a track that I knew like the back of my hand. So I didn't want to push it during a race that was already at the absolute outer levels of my ability. So I parked it after 41 laps.
And the most important thing for you right now is to complete all the laps, right? Not where you finish, but just to get seat time. And
I would have done it at Mid-Ohio had my transmission decided it no longer wanted to be a transmission and would rather be a pile of oil. And I haven't even looked at it yet.
Well, we'll get to that issue, but so most people, we already know that you skipped like 500 different levels. Like you went straight from kindergarten to college.
Yep.
Right. And I kind of know some guys, and there's probably, I would say, if there's 50 Arca Menards cars nationwide, out of that 50, I would say 5 or maybe 6 are one car teams, guys that are doing it out of a shop somewhere by themselves. But I saw this so you buy an Arca Menards car.
Yep. I had always been since I started getting into racing, I've been watching like the NASCAR radioactive videos and the little summaries on Facebook. And I'm like driving my little Spec Miata around my local club track. And I'm like, that's real racing. Like, I had it in my head. Like, I wish I'd be watching the videos and be like, oh, I wish I was born rich. I wish I had started this 20 years ago, but that's never an option for me. So, I just wish and watch the videos. And then an acquaintance of mine was all like, hey, have you heard of the Arca Menard series? I'm like, no. And he goes, well, it's owned by NASCAR. So technically it is a NASCAR series and you can buy a car for like $25K. That's a big fat lie. But I looked into it a little bit and it was like, okay, well, that's what I'm doing, I guess. And sold the Spec Miata trailer and went and bought a roller and had no idea what I was doing. But when everything in your life is hard, this isn't any different than being homeless and having to scrape together a life from nothing or moving to a state you've never lived in before at 23 or learning how to drive. It's just another challenge. And I don't think I realized the enormity of it until I was well in it.
Yeah.
And someone told me
I would do it backwards if I was you. Like if somebody said right now, do you want to buy an Arca car? You want to be homeless? I'd be like, I'm going to be homeless.
Yeah.
Like that's easier than having an Arca Menards car. Right.
Oh, so it's fun though.
What did you tow your Miata in?
I had a 7 by 14 foot enclosed steel trailer. And I was towing it with a single cab, half-ton short bed pickup that had a max towing capacity of about 5,000 pounds. It was really sketchy.
So that in and of itself, it's like when my boys wanted to go racing and I'm like, okay, well, a jack is $600 and the tools and the truck and the trailer and and so most people, but you're not most people. We've established that. I think you're kind of crazy, to be honest with you. Like
my husband would probably agree with you. He hates racing.
Oh, that's not cool either.
He's a wonderful guy and he does support me. Like at Berlin, he texted me and goes, why aren't you on track? And I was like, you watched the race.
Oh,
I did not think he was going to. But for the most part, he wishes that car would just roll down the hill and disappear.
This is nuts. So, and then I want to go over. So, do you know what it costs to rent an Arca Menards car?
I do. It depends on the team. You can find deals as low as 5,000, maybe even cheaper if you don't mind running a starting park. As high as 70, 75K a weekend for the Venturini cars. It is not cheap to rent a car. And that's part of the reason why I bought my own is I couldn't afford to rent a car and pay for the damage deposit. So I was like, screw it.
What did you hear for? So I know that to rent, and I won't say whose cars, but it's $65,000 a race to get a competitive car on the West Coast right now.
That sounds accurate for the main series as well.
And that doesn't include a crash clause or an open credit card. And what were you hearing about? I tried to do this in the truck series a couple years ago, and went through these numbers to race Eldora in the truck series. And so, what were you hearing crash clause? Why? I think a lot of people don't even know what a crash clause is.
I heard anything from 5 to 20, and I never asked the Venturini crash clause because I couldn't even think about affording that car.
Like an open credit card or a cash.
Yeah,
because when I
generally
rented my
open
car,
credit card, or you give them a check and you're like, all right, I got the money right here. And bless his heart, I don't think Alex Club realized that when he rented his car for Charlotte, because he had a $15,000 crash clause, and then his car hit the wall at Charlotte, and then his driver, bless his heart, just did not have the money to pay for it. And I remember thinking, why didn't you check that? Because now you got to fix your car.
I've heard a lot of stories about that, even, in super late model racing and stuff like that. So you, and you're like the consummate true race fan, right? But you're more of a Saturday night local race fan, like I was, where I come out of the stands and my first car is $1,500, a street stock, right? A 66 Chevelle or whatever.
Nice.
You're coming out of the stands and jumping in a car. Well, you said it was only $5,000 or whatever, right? Cheap. What did your roller cost you?
So the roller I bought from Circle Track Warehouse, and it was $14K.
And it was 10 years old, 9 years old.
Yeah, it's 2000. Well, you know how the body's 2014, no matter what. The car was made, I think, in 2017 and raced in the K&N East Series.
Okay.
And it had no drivetrain. It was.
Did it have a gear?
I got the impression that it had just been kind of pieced together to be a roller. It had a 14-to-1 gearbox. I was trying to road course it
with that gearbox.
Yes, I had no idea that was a bad thing until Xfinity team looked at my car, and they're like, an Xfinity team was nice enough to take time out of their day and get my car ready for Mid-Ohio. And their car chief looked at the gearbox and he's like, yeah, no, you've got to replace this.
The steering box, right?
Yes, it's steering box. Yes.
Yeah, we had the same issue when we go to a dirt track. If we didn't have the better steering box, you're just, I can't imagine.
I just didn't realize how much wheel input I had until I got the 10-to-1 gearbox. And I was like, oh, I can catch the car now. This is great. Back end comes out. I'm fast now.
And the steering wheel size. So I'm writing this. So 14, no safety. Right.
Yep. No drivetrain. I had to update all the safety gear. And I had no idea.
Seat. What kind of seat did you get?
Butler built.
Okay, so $1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Is your husband going to yell at you when we go through this?
He's in the other room and the door's closed, and he's probably in bed, so he doesn't. We've learned that marital harmony happens when I do not tell him about how much car stuff is. I bought an AIM Smarty Cam for my Miata before I sold it, and I was like, it was only $1,000, and he's like, you spent $1,000 on a camera, and I'm like, okay, that was a mistake.
So by the time, safety is seats, probably $1,000 by itself, but let's just say safety is $1,000, right? And all that. And then,
and then I had to update the belts. I had to get a smaller steering wheel because that big one was on it.
That's a great road. That's a good road course wheel, but
it was more just that I'm a full figured woman. I have big thighs. And when we tested the car at Nashville Super Speedway Roval, we discovered that big steering wheel did not work.
Well, and that's another thing is most guys have, I built my own cars, but even, you want the pedals at a certain place and the steering wheel at a certain place, and you didn't get any of that. You got what was handed to you.
Yep.
And fire suits. What does a fire suit go for nowadays? $1,500?
So that one was $1,000 because it was custom. And that was the cheapest cut I could find. One problem with being a female is not everything fits you off the shelf.
So I'm not going to go line by line, but by the time you went to the track and
I had about 55 in that car total.
Yeah.
Including the motor. Bob, have you ever heard of Ramlock Racing Enterprises?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob and Dick, they built the car for me, and oh my God. So Bob quoted me a price. Well, actually, so what happened is I talked to the ARCA, a technical guy, and I said, look, my budget is change I found in my couch cushions. Can you recommend someone who can help me with my car? And he recommended Bob and Dick. He said they'd probably work on my budget. And Bob's an absolute sweetheart, and Dick would complain about it because I'm pretty sure they built that car for a loss. I think they pretty much just charged me for the parts, and they got it ready. They had needed shocks and springs and all kinds of stuff. And they built one of their motors for me, and it's amazing. But yeah, probably about 55K total, give or take.
Did you have to change the body?
No, and that's one of the reasons why I bought that roller is it had the body that was legal.
The current body, because those aren't cheap right now.
No, and I'm actually looking at having to get it rebodied probably within the next 5 years. Rumor has it, and rumors are often correct when it comes to this, that they're discontinuing the SS body and going to the Camaro body. So I'm gonna have to start thinking about budgeting for that. Yeah, it's just a rumor. Nothing's been put out in the rules, but you know.
Yeah. Do you know who owns the body company?
5-star?
Yeah. Do you know who owns 5-star?
I do not.
You better do some research. They're going to change it. You watch. It's the NASCAR mafia. They own 5-star.
That's one thing I discovered is you put a NASCAR label or a stock car label on it, and you are going to pay twice what you should.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is, though. If you want to play, you got to pay, I guess.
Have you thought after a couple of races? First of all, when you told the official, like, I'm coming from Mazda Miata and I'm going to go ARCA racing and my budget is what I found on my couch, was he like, all right? Or was he like, did he try to give you a little education?
I don't think anyone actually thought I was going to do it, honestly. I have never not done what I set out to do. When I started getting into Miatas, and I told the other Miata drivers that I was going to turn my car into a spec Miata, a year later, several people came up to me and they were like, "We didn't think you were going to do it, but holy hell, you did." And so I think with the ARCA stuff, people didn't know me, and they're like, "Oh, she'll just track it and then sell it." Well, that wasn't going to happen. But no, the ARCA officials were nice. They actually approved me to run road courses only last year. When I was trying to find funding for one race, which I'm really glad that didn't work out because I would have wrecked that car at Mid-Ohio last year.
On a rental.
Yeah.
How are you going to, I've been through this process. How are you going to get licensed for oval track or super speedway or anything? Where are you going to get, do you have a plan for picking up the experience to get your license to go run North Wilkesboro or Bristol or something?
So ARCA is okay with me running half-mile short tracks. I didn't embarrass myself. Yes. I didn't embarrass myself so badly at Berlin where they were like, "You're unsafe." They actually came up and complimented me later. They're like, "You did a good job of staying out of the way of fast cars. We appreciate that. Your driving got better as the night progressed." So they're still good with me racing half miles. I was thinking about trying to do the Daytona test next February, but I don't know if I can get it together in time because right now I'm down a shock and a transmission and still got to chase down that engine idling issue. But if I can get approved for Daytona, then I should be okay for any of the other tracks. And then I'm just going to send it.
You sound like my grandchild's son now. Send it. I'm just going to send it, Grandpa. There are so many things wrong here that like I think the most, because I'm looking at it from both sides, and I think the most brilliant thing is that you don't know what you're doing and that you haven't engaged in somebody that does know what they're doing. Because had you engaged, like when I was going to go truck racing, I talked to Bodine and Hornaday, and I grew up racing with Hornaday. We shared a shop in our valley, and he was pretty open because he had raced with me. But I mean, Bodine was like, you know, he's a championship truck racer, right? So he's like, well, the truck's going to cost you this, and then this is going to cost you this, and then you're going to have this. And then, you know, I talked to the NASCAR officials, and I got licensed to run any track I wanted to run. And
Nice.
but by the time I was done talking to the pros, the so-called pros, I wanted to be in the fetal position and just go race mini stocks somewhere, you know. And so nobody has said, girl, you're crazy, or try to talk you out of it.
No. Jim Drago from E Street Racing, when I talked about how much I could get for my Miata, because it's his engine, you know, it's a well-built Miata. I actually got $17K selling an NA Miata, and I think it's because of his engine. He's like, yeah, you're gonna kill yourself. And I'm like, you know, this is a person whose opinion I respect, so I'm gonna build the stock car, and then I'm gonna practice a lot. So ARCA was pretty happy with me practicing in that stock car. As long as I didn't do any NASCAR tracks, I could do all the local club tracks I wanted, and even do the National Super Speedway Roval, because ARCA or NASCAR doesn't run that configuration. So the car was ready in August of 2021. And I did as many track days as I could between August and March of this year.
But did they let you do those track days at tracks that they race on, or did you have to do them? Yeah, because you only get so many tests a year on a track that you're actually, the teams are limited anyway. But if you're technically, I guess, if you're not in the series yet or anything, you're just out.
Yeah. Once I got
in one of their cars.
Yeah, until I got licensed, it was a non-issue. Once I got licensed, their only requirement was that I couldn't test on any tracks that NASCAR runs and the configuration that NASCAR runs. But Barber Motorsports Park, a world-class road course track, is a half hour from my house. Road Atlanta is 3.5 hours. NCM's not far, Carolina Motorsports Park. So I had the opportunity to practice with that car. And so Bob and Dick Rahilly set the car up for me, and then they brought it to Nashville Super Speedway Roval in August of 2021, and that was the first time I got behind the wheel. And we spent about 30 minutes with me idling around the parking lot because I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never dealt with a race clutch before, so just getting it started was a challenge. And bless their hearts, they thought I was 5'7". I'm 5'3", so nothing in that car fit me. We had to shove like their assorted old man heating pads behind my back so I could reach the pedals.
Right.
And literally lap 1, turn 1 of National Super Speedway Roval, I went, I have made a terrible mistake.
So I realized that was your first thinking, this probably wasn't good.
I was like, wow, I am not ready for this. But that's never discouraged me. I wasn't ready when, I got kicked out of my house. I wasn't ready. And so many other times in my life, and I've always forged ahead. So rather than, sell the car and, buy a street stock or something, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a plan on how I'm going to get ready. Hence this nice iRacing rig and a lot of track days.
Mm-hmm. That's one advantage that kids now have is sims and iRacing compared to just going out and tearing stuff up and going through crash classes. When I came up, we just tore stuff up. We jump in $100,000 super late model and tear it up and then fix it and tear it up. And I always say that, I used to take everything to Hornaday to weld it. And once he told me, if you don't learn how to weld, you're going to go broke. And so I started doing my own stuff. But
I come across as kind of cavalier about all this, but I have put a ton of thought into where I want my racing career to go, a ton of time. I've talked to current and former Cup drivers about how to improve my racing, talked to a lot of driver coaches. I'm pretty humble in admitting I don't have the experience I need. And I think people respect that. And then a lot of time on iRacing, a lot of time working on my racecraft and getting faster in my stock car. So I know I come across as kind of like,
but I mean, that's endearing, but that's cool, right? Because and we have really good championship racers we've talked to that come across the same way. They're very cavalier about it. And Derek Thorne and Sedgwick, who's the all-time winningest ARCA crew chief, and Derek Thorne, who's won 4 ARCA championships. They never once said it was because of them, or it's always they tell something else, which is good.
Yeah.
And
Right.
how many jobs are you working right now?
Normally 5, but right now 4 because school is not in session. I work full-time, of course, as a police sergeant, 40 hours a week. And then I work at our local hospital as like contract security because they really like having cops there on Thursday nights. Saturday nights, afternoons, I'm working at Walmart, same thing, contract off-duty security. And then I'm working in an apartment complex Saturday nights till like 4 or 5 a.m. And then that's 1, 2, 3, my regular job 4. And then when school is in session, I work in the mornings as a school resource officer. Is how I pay for racing.
So when do you have time to practice on your sims?
The way my schedule works out, I have about half to a whole day off on Fridays. So that's a big one for me. And then, I just won't sleep. I'll get 6 hours of sleep instead of 8, 4 hours of sleep instead of 6 in practice. Also, marketing, promotional stuff. There's so much to racing other than the racing part. And that was something I did not realize until Berlin, when I had pretty much just interviews for the week leading up to Berlin. And I'm like, I have no time to get anything done. There's a lot more to it than just going around fast in circles.
Did Danica Patrick have any influence on you at all?
It's okay to say no.
No. She is a solid driver. She did well. She was an IndyCar and did well. And then transitioned to NASCAR and seemed like a solid mid-pack driver. I liked the way she marketed herself. She found a niche and she went for it and it worked for her. Is
there any particular driver that you've kind of looked up to, that you've kind of modeled or patterned anything after?
Not really.
Besides me, Rita.
Yes, besides you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I've really just been trying to forge my own path. Everything I've done is pretty unique leading up to here. And Brad Smith. So Brad Smith is in the ARCA Menards main series, and he is an underfunded driver who's on an old legacy engine like me, and he's got a tiny crew like me, and he's in an enclosed trailer, not a cool hauler like me. And he manages to race professionally, cleanly. He's never on the way on the track. So I kind of watch him and I'm like, he's well respected in the paddock. And I'm like, that's realistically the kind of driver I can expect to be.
So Rita, it's a garage. Paddock is Mazda Miata terms.
Garage. But it's a paddock. It's not even a garage.
It's a garage.
Easy. Take it easy.
I will call the paddock a garage.
Speaking of garage, this is another thing that fascinated me this week, Brandon.
My stock car crammed into my garage.
She freaking came home and had a broken transmission, and I've been there. Do you have a flat driveway, a steep driveway, or?
About like that.
Do you have an HOA?
Yep.
She has her freaking car in her garage at her house.
I
bet you're the only ARCA Menards series driver in history that had their ARCA car in their garage.
I have a typical 2-car suburban garage, and I share it with my husband. He's really into woodworking.
He shares it with you.
What?
He shares it with you.
Yeah. He shares it with me.
Yes.
There's no woodworking podcast. Tell him that.
Well, half of it is his woodworking, and then half of it is my car. And we get in at like 3 a.m. because one of my spotters, the one that drove to and from Tuscaloosa with me, really wanted to watch the SRX race in Nashville on the way home. So yeah, we didn't get in till 2 or 3. And then he's like, yes, let's unload the car. And it's 3 a.m. and I'm exhausted. And I woke my husband up and he's like, is something wrong? I'm like, nope, we're unloading a stock car at 3 a.m. And side note, it doesn't run. Thankfully, we prepared for this. We have a winch mounted in my garage.
I was going to ask you that.
Yep. So we were able to get it kind of backed out and winched up, but it took a lot longer than I wish it had taken. And the winch bound up. It turns out it was bound up from the last time we did that. And so we had to spend about an hour dealing with that. Yeah. But my neighbors are very understanding of my budding stock car career. The best way to get that car in and out of the driveway, I've learned, is to park the truck and trailer at the end of the cul-de-sac at the end of the neighborhood and just drive the car back out of the garage and drive it up to the trailer. And I had to do that at 7 a.m. once on a Thursday. My neighbors are very tolerant of it, and I'm very grateful to them because that car is loud.
It's loud, and you're going to burn the clutch, and
Yep.
you know,
like the Wild West.
It's just, I could talk to you for another hour about this because, first of all, you're brilliant and you're articulate and you're bright. And what is your goal? Let's leave it with this, because you said, you have a plan. Where's the plan end for you?
So I would love to run a whole 20 race schedule at ARCA eventually. Obviously, I can't do that on my budget. On my budget, I can only run about 4 to 5 races, assuming nothing goes wrong. So I'm hoping to find sponsors and partners that like what I'm doing and like where I've been and want to work with me. Eventually, I'd like to run in the truck series. Just to say, I did one of the 3 main NASCAR series. I don't think, realistically, I like to think I'm a fairly talented driver, but you can't go back and create 20 years of experience. So I don't know if it's really ever going to be an option to do this full time, but it's going to be one hell of a part-time hobby. Well, full-time hobby. It takes up my life. What
do you listen? Are you buying tires and stuff? Or you just like, what are you spending right now? What did it cost to go to Mid-Ohio?
About $5,000.
So you don't count your food, your lodging, or your gas. You just count what goes on the race car.
Yeah. I try not to think about it too much because then I'll cry. But I had a really awesome thing worked out with club racing, where they were setting up the car, towing it to the track from their base in Morris, Morris, Illinois.
Okay.
They were providing fuel, they were providing used tires, they were providing a spotter and a crew. So pretty much for a flat fee of just under $5,000. The only thing I really had to do was get myself to the track.
That is a very nice deal from them to you.
It was a two-way deal. Their plan was they're really trying to run all 20 races so they can get on the A plan for next year, which is a significant increase in the purse for them.
Payouts, yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of doing each other a favor. They're a small underfunded team, and it would be a challenge for him to race all 20 races and do a good effort. So the plan was I was going to race about 5, and he was going to rent the car out for maybe 5, and then he was going to race about 10. But then my transmission went, and I had to, I felt bad leaving him in the position that I did, but I can't make money out of thin air, and I'm already working. I can, and it's not real practical for me to replace a transmission, fix my shock, fix the engine problem, and then show up to, IRP or Watkins Glen. And I'm still holding out some faint hope for Watkins Glen, but a miracle would have to happen for me to make it.
I hope for you that you get a miracle. If there's somebody that I've talked to that deserves a miracle, it's you. This has been an emotional and exciting journey for me to see a true fan want to go racing, to see somebody that's outside of my comfort zone in some areas to talk to and not talk to. And I have, as a racer, as an owner, I have so much respect for you and what you are doing and what you have done so far. It's just absolutely amazing. And you are a shining star for, I'm going to screw it up, the LGBTQ community. You're a shining star for homeless kids and foster kids and first responders. And the world needs more Ritas.
I don't know. My husband would probably argue that one is plenty.
Yeah. No, this has been fantastic, Rita. We've enjoyed it so much. We've learned a lot, and it's just we hope and wish nothing but the best for you going forward.
Well, thank thank you. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I will be back. Even if the Miracle for Watkins Glen doesn't work out, my plan is to go back to kind of amateur club racing all throughout the winter. Because one great thing in Alabama is there's no real off season. And then come back to ARCA in 2023 a lot faster and a lot more experienced. And yeah.
I'm going to be there. I will be at one of your ARCA races in 2023. And
that's awesome.
You know, so it's been great. I think we're going to wrap it up. And what do you think, Brandon? This has really been a joy.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been so much fun. We'll get your address and we'll send you some short track story swag. An unofficial sponsor because we don't have any money, but an unofficial sponsor.
I understand that.
We'll trade for a Tuscaloosa, Alabama police patch, right?
And I have those.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking with you guys.
Thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
ma'am.
it.
All right. Take care, Rita. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be in touch.